Marcus woke before the sun touched the sky. The small apartment was quiet, except for the slow hum of the old refrigerator and the soft breathing of his daughter, Mia, still asleep in the bed beside him. He rubbed his eyes and stared at the ceiling. For a moment, feeling the weight of another long day already pressing down on his shoulders. The rent notice lay on the kitchen table, its bright red letters mocking him. He sighed and swung his legs over the side of the bed, careful not to wake Mia. He padded across the creaky wooden floor in his thin slippers and opened the kitchen window. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth. Gray clouds gathered on the horizon, a promise of more rain. He glanced at the battered laptop on the counter where he had last tried to save enough money for rent. The screen was black now, a reminder that he still needed to fix the power cord. He leaned on the table, took a deep breath, and found his phone. The weather app showed heavy storms and possible flash floods later today. His heart sank. He could not afford to lose more? Marcus poured water into a chipped ceramic mug and set it on the stove. He measured a spoonful of instant coffee, stirring until the dark liquid swirled. The familiar taste gave him a small spark of energy. He walked back to Mia's bed and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She stirred, opening one eye. "Morning, Papa," she mumbled. He smiled and kissed her forehead. "Good morning, sweetheart.
Ow.
Be back before you know it." She nodded, snuggling deeper under the thin blanket. He dressed quickly in clothes he had worn for days. A faded t-shirt, one that once had a bright logo but now looked gray, and a pair of old jeans. He pulled on his worn-out sneakers and packed his backpack. Inside he placed a spare shirt for work, his wallet with only a few dollars, and a small notebook where he tracked job hours and bills. He grabbed the rent notice and slipped it into his back pocket. His phone buzzed with a text from his second job, asking if he could pick up an extra shift tonight. He hesitated. He needed rest, but he could not say no. Every extra hour meant a bit more toward rent. Soon he was on the street, the first drops of rain falling. He headed to the bus stop where he worked at a busy cafe by morning. On the way, he passed shuttered stores and closed shutters with old posters peeling off. A stray cat darted across the sidewalk, chasing a leaf. Marcus knelt and offered the cat a piece of his leftover toast. The cat sniffed, ate quickly, and disappeared into an alley. He watched it go, feeling a small warmth in his chest. He tucked the rest of his toast away. At the bus stop, a few other early commuters stood under a torn awning. A pregnant woman rubbed her belly, and an elderly man leaned on his cane. The sky darkened, and the wind picked up. Rain began to fall more steadily. Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other, glancing at the street. The gutters were already filling with water. He worried how quickly the creek that ran behind his building would rise. He checked the time. He had 10 minutes until his bus arrived. He pulled his jacket tighter and watched the road. The bus arrived with a whoosh of wind and water. Marcus climbed aboard, shaking off rainwater. He greeted the driver and paid his fare. Inside, people huddled together, faces weary. The bus lurched forward, and rain pattered against the windows. Marcus found a seat near the back. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the brief stillness. But sleep would not come. His mind raced through unpaid bills, the broken laptop, and Mia's school fees. He reached into his backpack and opened his notebook. He added a new entry. Bus to cafe, 8-hour shift, rent due. He tapped his pen against the page, thinking of ways to earn more. The bus rattled through flooded streets, splashing water as it passed puddles. At each stop, more people climbed aboard, umbrellas dripping. Marcus stood up and offered his seat to the elderly man who climbed on. The man nodded gratefully and sat down. Marcus held onto the rail, balancing himself. He glanced at his reflection in the window. His face looked tired, the dark circles under his eyes deeper than before. He took a deep breath and steadied himself. He could not give up now. When he reached the cafe, the door swung open to a wave of warm air and the smell of fresh bread. He greeted his coworkers and changed into his uniform, a black apron and a name tag with the words Marcus H. the apron tightly and retrieved a damp cloth to wipe down tables. The morning rush began. Customers ordered coffee, pastries, and breakfast sandwiches. Marcus moved quickly, making coffees, preparing toast, and serving plates. He offered friendly smiles and cared for each customer as if they were old friends. It was hard work, but he took pride in doing it well. As the hours passed, the rain grew heavier outside. The news on the small TV in the corner showed flooded streets and rising water levels. A reporter warned of flash floods in the area. Marcus's heart pounded. He watched the screen, imagining Mia alone in the apartment if the water rose too high. He told his manager he needed a quick break. The manager, a kind woman named Carla, nodded and handed him a cup of water. They stepped outside into the storm. The wind blew strong and rain stung his face. He pulled his jacket hood over his head and looked toward the creek behind his building. Water had already spilled over its banks, rushing toward the nearby street. Panic rose in his chest. He took a step forward, then paused. He knew he had to get back to Mia. He jogged back inside, dripping wet, and told Carla he needed to leave. Early, she frowned but nodded. Go. Take care of your daughter. He thanked her and grabbed his backpack. Back on the street, the rain came down in sheets. He ran toward home, water soaking his clothes. Each step was a struggle as water pooled. At his ankles, he skirted around flooded patches and held his phone above his head. At times, the water reached his knees. He remembered the rent money in his pocket. The thought of losing it made him frantic. He guarded that pocket with one hand as he ran. When he reached his building, he saw neighbors huddled at the door, faces pale. Someone shouted that the water was rising fast and might trap people inside. Marcus's heart pounded. He focused on getting upstairs. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, water splashing under his shoes. On the 3rd floor, he heard Mia crying. He pushed open the door to their apartment and saw her clutching her beloved teddy bear. Water had seeped under the door and was ankle-deep in the hallway. Mia called. She looked up with tear-filled eyes. He dropped his bag and rushed. To her side, he wrapped her in his arms, pulling her close. I'm here, baby. I'm okay. She trembled, and he eased her to the sofa, lifting her onto the cushions, where she could stay dry. He pulled off his wet jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She sniffled and nodded. Liz smiled to calm her. He looked at the rent notice. In his pocket and then at the rising water behind their building, he knew they needed help. He picked up his phone and dialed his sister, hoping she could find a dry place for Mia. As he spoke softly to his sister, he watched water swirl past their windows. He held Mia close, heart full of worry and love. In that moment, he vowed he would do anything to keep her safe, no matter the cost. Rain fell in heavy sheets, turning the street into a rushing river. Marcus stood at the apartment door, Mia safe in his sister's care, in a dry house on higher ground. He had convinced his sister to take Mia until the storm passed. Still pounded from the fear he'd felt, but he knew he could not simply wait inside. Other people might need help. He swallowed hard, zipped up his wet jacket, and stepped back into the storm. The wind whipped at his face, and rain stung his skin. Water raced down the stairs, making each step slick. Marcus gripped the railing, careful not to slip. At the bottom, he waded through ankle-deep water that surged around parked cars like angry waves. He clenched his teeth, focused on his goal. Find anyone in danger and help if he could. As he walked, he saw trash cans and loose boards float past. The wind moaned through broken fences, and the sky roared above him. He reached the street corner, where the bus stop had been this morning. Now it was under a foot of churning water. Cars splashed by, sending torrents into the gutter that threatened to wash him off his feet. Suddenly, a piercing cry cut through the storm. Marcus froze, straining to locate it. He heard it again, a child's voice, small and frightened. He turned toward the sound, scanning the flooded street. Not far away, near a lamppost half submerged, he saw a little girl clinging to the metal pole. She was soaked through, her thin dress plastered to her legs, arms wrapped tightly around the pole. Each time a car passed, a wave knocked at her back, but she held on. Her eyes were wide with terror. Marcus's heart clenched. He had rescued his own daughter. Now another child needed him. Without hesitating, he waded toward her. Water rose. Above his knees, cold and swift, he took slow, careful steps, one foot in front of the other. He reached a fallen street sign and steadied himself, keeping his eyes locked on the girl. The floodwater tugged at his clothes, tugged at his body, but he pressed on. He called out in a calm voice, "Hey there, I'm coming. Hold on." The girl glanced at him, eyes filling with hope. A wave slammed into her, pushing her against the lamppost. She cried out, "Help me." Marcus quickened his pace. He reached her side and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "I've got you," he said. She nodded, trembling. He wrapped his strong arm around her small waist and moved to stand between her and the rushing water. A car roared past, sending a wall of water over them both. Marcus held tight, leaning against the current as he sheltered the girl. He pressed his body against hers, lifting her from the side so her head stayed above water. She buried her face in his jacket, shaking. He whispered, "It's okay. I won't. Let go." Behind him, he spotted a sturdy branch floating by. He reached out, grabbed it, and used it like a brace against the lamppost. The branch stuck against the post, giving him a stable point to push off. He took a deep breath, then lifted the girl higher on his hip. He braced both feet against the current and kicked off the post, drenching himself in another wave. Then he turned back toward the safer sidewalk. Every step was a battle. The water tried to sweep them away, but Marcus kept his body low and his steps deliberate. He thought of Mia, how relieved she had been in her sister's arms. That thought gave him strength. Inch by inch, he moved toward shore. The girl clung to him, sobbing softly. Marcus held her close. "Almost there," he said, though his own voice shook it at last. They reached a shallow patch where the water dropped to ankle level. A group of neighbors had gathered under a broken awning, shouting encouragement. One of them held out a towel. Marcus handed the girl to him, and she was wrapped quickly. She looked up at Marcus with tear-streaked cheeks and whispered, "Thank you." Marcus nodded, breathing hard. He watched as the girl was led to safety. He felt a bruise forming on his hip where the lamppost had struck him in the surge, but he barely noticed. All he felt was relief that the child was safe. He watched her small figure disappear around the corner with an adult, then turned back to face the flood. He knew the storm would not let up soon. He saw cars stalling in the rising water, lights flickering. A bus groaned as it tried to pass, its wheels spinning. He recognized the driver, an old friend named Luis. Luis waved and rolled down his window. "Marcus, you all right?" he shouted over the wind. Marcus nodded. "I'm okay." "How many left on the bus? Anybody in trouble?" Luis shook his head. "Empty now. I dropped everyone off. I was just heading back to the depot." Marcus offered his hand. "Thanks. Be safe." Luis gave a relieved smile and drove off slowly, leaving Marcus standing in the street. The rain eased a little, then fell harder again. Marcus was soaked through from head to toe. He thought of Mia alone, waiting for him. He pulled out his phone to check the balance, hoping his sister had taken a dry route home. The phone buzzed with a message. "We're safe. Mia misses you." He exhaled, feeling a pinch of joy. Tapped back. "Be there soon. Stay safe." He looked around. Streetlights flickered, casting a dim glow on the wet pavement. Trash and branches littered the road. Marcus stepped forward, through the water again. He felt the ache in his legs and the cold seeping into his bones, but he marched on. He could not rest until every person nearby found shelter. He reached a fallen tree, blocking a side street. He paused, unwilling to let anyone come that way. He grabbed a piece of broken fence beside him and used it to poke the branches aside, clearing a small path. Water flowed through, carrying away bits of debris. He stood back and nodded, satisfied. As he prepared to head home, he heard a shout, "Over here!" He turned to see an elderly woman on her porch, water swirling at her front steps. She held a flashlight, trying to guide someone. She spotted Marcus and waved frantically. He approached and knelt in the water. "Ma'am, are you all right?" she cried. "My husband is trapped inside," she said, voice shaking. The door jammed. Marcus nodded. He took her hand. "Stay calm, I'll help him out." He waded to her front door, water lapping at his waist. He pushed against the doorframe and felt it give. He slid inside and helped the man out through a side window, guiding him to safety on the porch. The couple embraced, tears in their eyes. Marcus touched his chin modestly. "Just doing what I can." He thanked him again and again, offering him dry clothes and hot tea. He shook his head. "I need to get back to my daughter," he said softly. The woman pressed a fleece blanket into his hands. "Take this," she said. "You deserve it." He wrapped it around his shoulders, grateful. He stepped back into the storm, warmth from the blanket chasing off the chill. He paused and looked around one last time. The creek behind the buildings had peaked and was now receding. The worst of the flood seemed over. He felt hope building in his chest, set off toward his sister's house, determined to reach Mia and hold her close again. By the time he reached his sister's door, the rain had slowed to a gentle patter. His sister opened the door and pulled him inside. Mia ran into his arms, excited and relieved. He hugged her tightly, breathing in her hair. "Papa!" she cried. He held her close and whispered, "I'm here now. Everything will be all right." Looked at his sister and the girl he loved, safe and warm. In that moment, Marcus felt a deep sense of purpose. He had helped strangers because he knew how it felt to need help. And now, as the storm finally eased, he knew he had been a hero, not because he sought praise, but because he acted when it mattered most. Marcus felt the cold settle into his bones as he wrapped the thin blanket around his shoulders. He still trembled from the cold water and from the rush of adrenaline that had carried him through the flood. His clothes were soaked, heavy against his skin, and each breath felt sharp in his chest. Yet, as he stood under the highway overpass, he found himself more aware of the warmth in his heart than the chill in his body. The little girl rested safely in the arms of a paramedic, wrapped in a thick towel. He watched her small body relax. As her mother pressed close, tears streaming down both their faces, a soft voice called his name. He turned to see the girl's father walking toward him on unsteady legs, his face pale in the dim light. The man carried his daughter's other arm and moved slowly, as though he still did not fully believe his child was safe. When he reached Marcus, he stopped and looked up at him. For a moment, neither spoke. The father's eyes filled with gratitude, so deep that Marcus felt an ache in his chest. The man held out his hand, but Marcus did not shake it. Instead, he placed a hand over the man's arm, the same way he had held the little girl's shoulder in the flood. "Thank you," the man whispered, voice thick. "You saved her life." Marcus nodded, his own voice caught in his throat. He looked down at the little girl who now smiled faintly at him from her mother's arms. She reached out a hand, and he lifted his own, letting her grasp his finger. He smiled back at her, careful not to let his eyes look too tired or too sad. "You're safe now," he said. The girl's mother stepped forward and pressed a damp cheek to his arm. "You're an angel," she said softly. Marcus felt the words settle on his shoulders like a burden he did not deserve. He cleared his throat and managed a small smile. "It was nothing," he said, though he knew how wrong that sounded. It had been everything to him. He'd risked his life, faced the water, felt the power of the flood trying to pull him under. And he had not hesitated for a single second. A paramedic called out that the family would head to the hospital for a checkup and that Marcus should sit and rest, take a warm drink. Marcus shook his head. "I should go," he said. The paramedic frowned but did not press. He took a step away, his legs aching beneath him. His eyes passed over the highway pillars, where water dripped like tears. He felt the ground beneath him quiver as another car passed overhead. He hugged himself, rubbing his arms, and felt the cold slide away, replaced by an uncomfortable tightness in his chest. He pulled out his phone to check the time, but the screen had shattered in the flood. He stared at the cracks, remembering how he had tucked the device into his pocket along with the rent money. He remembered the weight of the bills and the fear that came with them. Now, all that lay at the bottom of the street like broken glass and lost hope. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, let his hand drift over the rent notice he still carried. The red letters seemed to glow in the dim light, demanding attention. He closed his eyes and pressed a hand against his forehead, trying to push away the worry. But the worry came back stronger, Mia's face in the arms of his sister. The rent notice on the table, the broken laptop, the overdue notices that might now mean eviction. He swallowed hard. He had saved a life today, another person's daughter. He had done something incredible. The world he returned to would not pause for his heroism. It would not forgive the past debts or the lost money. It would not care how many children. He had helped if he could not help his own family. He looked up as headlights cut through the darkness. A news crew had arrived, their cameras set up under the overpass. A reporter approached him, microphone in hand. "Sir," she said, "can you tell us what happened? You're being called a hero." Marcus shook his head and stepped back. "I don't want to talk," he said quietly. The reporter pressed, asking questions about the rescue, about how he felt. But Marcus turned away. He did not want to be on camera. He did not want words about him splashed on a screen. All he wanted was to get home and hold Mia close, to show her that everything would be okay. He found his path back to the street and started walking. The flood had begun to recede, but the street still held water that reached his ankles. He pushed through the wet, his shoes sloshing with every step. His mind raced with questions. Where would they live if they lost the apartment? Could he borrow? Money? Could he work extra nights and days? How many more times could he push himself before he broke? As he passed the cafe where he worked, he saw the lights still on inside. Marcus remembered Carla, his manager, telling him to take care of his daughter. He remembered the day shift coworkers offering to cover hours. He had not thanked them properly. He felt a tug of guilt. He quickened his pace toward a payphone on the corner, hoping his sister would answer. He dialed, listening to each ring. When she picked up, he heard her tired voice. "Marcus," she said. "Are you okay?" He paused, trying to gather his voice. I'm fine. I watched you on the news," she said. "Everyone is talking about you. They say you saved that little girl's life." Marcus rubbed his forehead. "Hey, don't feel like a hero," he said softly. "I feel like I don't know what to do next." There was a pause, and then his sister spoke firmly. "You did something amazing, Marcus. But you can't let this break you. You have people who care. Let them help. We'll figure out the rent. We'll find a way." He closed his eyes, leaning against the cold phone booth. For the first time, he let himself lean. He let the tears come, though he could not feel them. On his cheeks because the rain had stopped, he breathed in the night air, letting his sister's words ground him. "I'm heading back to the apartment now," he said. "Mia's waiting for me." "Okay," she said. "I'll be there when you get back." He hung up and stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the empty street. He felt a tremor in his hands, a mix of cold and fear and relief. Then he turned and walked on. When he reached the apartment door, he found his sister sitting. On the floor, Mia curled in her lap.
Oh.
They had lit candles to chase away the shadows. The little girl looked up and smiled, her wet hair braided by her aunt's gentle hands. Marcus knelt and wrapped his arms around them both. He pressed his cheek against Mia's head and felt her soft hair under his lips. "Papa," she whispered sleepily. He kissed her hair. "I'm here," he said. "I'm never leaving you." His sister stood and hugged him. "You saved another family tonight," she said. "Let us save you now." He closed his eyes and rested his head against her shoulder. The blanket he carried was draped over them all. For a long while he stayed like that, letting the warmth of the room drive out the chill of the flood. In the days that followed, word spread of Marcus's rescue. A neighbor knocked on his door with hot food. A coworker dropped off a thick sweater. Carla stepped in, offering him extra shifts without asking for repayment. The landlord, moved by a letter from the little girls, family agreed to give him an extra week to pay rent. These small acts of kindness piled up like bricks, forming a path forward for Marcus. He still worried. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, He woke to the image of the lamppost, the little girl's frightened face, the roar of the water. But he also woke to his daughter's sleepy smile, his sister's soft voice, the warmth of the coffee Carla brought on his doorstep. One morning, he found a small envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a note from the girl's family. Thank you for saving our daughter. Please let us help you now. There was a check, just enough to cover a week of rent. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his notebook. He thought of the red rent notice now pinned on his wall with a thumbtack instead of lying on the table. He thought of the flood of kindness that had washed into his life. He took a deep breath and looked at Mia sleeping in her bed. She was safe, warm, dreaming of happier days. Marcus kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you for saving me too." He left the room quietly and sat at his small desk. He opened the notebook where he tracked bills and hours. He wrote 2 new entries. One marked paid rent extension, and one marked community help. Then he wrote a new note at the top of the page. Keep going. He closed the notebook and stood. The sun peeked through the blinds, lighting the room with soft gold. Marcus picked up his phone, yes. He still needed a new one, and dialed Carla to say he'd be in early for his next shift. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the street, peaceful now, without a puddle in sight. He smiled. He had walked through a storm and come out stronger. He had given life and received help in return. And though the future remained uncertain, he no longer felt alone. He felt hope. He felt a quiet power within him, the power of a man who had faced a flood and found solid ground. Rain had stopped by morning, leaving streets damp and quiet. The sun peeked through broken clouds, casting a soft light over the neighborhood. Marcus stepped outside his apartment, breathing in fresh air that smelled of earth and new beginnings. His clothes were dry now, but he still wore the damp blanket the elderly woman had given him. It reminded him of last night's rescue and the kindness he had found in the storm as he walked down the block. He noticed a small crowd gathered around the corner news van. The reporter from last night stood beside the camera, her microphone in hand. Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He had hoped to stay out of sight today, to simply get on with life. Yet here he was, front and center, wearing the same faded clothes, the same worried expression. A technician waved him over. "Mr. Hayes?" The reporter called gently. "I'd like to talk to you about what happened. You're inspiring people." "All over town?" Marcus hesitated, glanced toward his building where Mia waited for him, drawing pictures to show him. He thought of the rent notice still pinned on his wall, the bills piling up. He felt a flush of embarrassment. Could he stand here and speak about heroism when he himself felt so fragile? He took a breath and approached the camera. The reporter smiled kindly. "Marcus, thank you for coming. Can you tell our viewers how you felt when you saw that little girl in danger?" He swallowed and rubbed his hands together. I felt scared," he admitted quietly. "But I knew I couldn't just stand there, I thought of my daughter. I know what it's like to be afraid, to need someone to help you. So I just did what any father would do." The reporter nodded and turned to the camera. "There you have it, folks. A humble man who acted without hesitation. Marcus Hayes reminds us that courage can come from simple love." As the camera clicked off, a neighbor stepped forward. Mrs. Delgado, from across the hall, offered him a plate of warm empanadas. "You must eat something," she said, her eyes bright. "Please stay dry." She pressed a brown paper bag into his hands. Inside was a loaf of bread, cheese, and a small bottle of juice. Further down, Mr. Chen, the convenience store owner, waved and handed Marcus a gift card. "Use this for groceries," he said. "You've earned it." Marcus thanked him, feeling tears prick his eyes. Every small offering felt like a drop of hope. Carla arrived next, still in her cafe uniform, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. She hugged Marcus tightly. "I told you to take your time," she teased lightly. "But look at you now, a local celebrity." She placed the coffee in his hand. "On the house, of course." Marcus sipped the coffee gratefully. Its warmth spread through him, easing the ache in his chest. He looked at the steaming liquid and thought how small gestures could mean so much. A cup of coffee, a plate of food, a kind word, they all added up, like little stones building a path forward. Later that day, he checked his phone and saw notifications from coworkers who had set up an online fundraiser. Marcus had never asked for money in his life. Pride tugged at him. But when he saw the names and messages, "You deserve this. Thank you for reminding us of what matters," he realized accepting help did not diminish him. It connected him to people who cared. By evening, the fundraiser had raised enough to cover 2 weeks of rent. He stared at the number in disbelief. The red rent notice on his wall had felt like a weight of shame. Now, paper and pixels combined to lift that weight, giving him breathing room. He sat at his small dining table, his notebook open before him. He wrote, "Rent covered. Community help. Gratitude." He paused, pen in midair, and reflected on how his life had changed in one night. He had gone to bed afraid and woken up embraced by kindness. Outside, kids played in puddles, laughing as they splashed each other. He watched them from his window, remembering Mia's laughter and the way her face lit up when he returned. Smiled and closed the notebook. Deciding to join his neighbors, he stepped outside again and found a group of people clearing debris from the sidewalk. Branches, trash, sandbags, they worked together, passing buckets of water to rinse away mud. "We're doing a block cleanup," someone explained. "Thought we'd invite everyone." Marcus picked up a broom and started sweeping. The rhythm of the bristles against the pavement felt soothing, as if he were brushing away last night's fear. As he worked, neighbors greeted him warmly. They offered jokes and thanks. He realized that in helping to rebuild the street, he was also rebuilding his place in the community. Each sweep, each branch moved, felt like a stitch mending the ripped edges of his life. After the cleanup, the landlord, Mr. Patel, knocked on Marcus's door. Marcus opened it, surprised. "Mr. Patel," he said. "You didn't have to." The landlord held out an envelope. "I have a letter here from the family you saved," he said. "They asked me to pass this on." Inside was a handwritten note. "We can never repay you for saving our daughter. Please let us help you keep a roof over your home." There was a check enclosed, marked 1 week's rent. Marcus's throat tightened. He looked at Mr. Patel, who nodded. "Take it," the landlord said. "You've earned more than just kindness." Marcus accepted the envelope with both hands. "Thank you," he whispered. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let us help," Mr. Patel replied with a gentle smile. "That's enough." That night, Marcus sat with Mia in his lap as he told her the story of the cleanup. She giggled when he described the kids splashing in puddles. He showed her the thank you cards he had taped on the fridge, each one a bright color with a sweet message. Mia pointed at a drawing. A child had made a stick figure with a Superman cape. "Papa, are you a Superman?" she asked with wide eyes. He hugged her close and kissed her forehead. "No, baby," he said softly. "I'm just someone who loves you very much." She nodded and leaned against him, drifting off to sleep. After she slept, Marcus turned to his computer and wrote emails to thank everyone who had donated. He typed slowly, carefully, wanting each message to sound sincere. Some responses came quickly with more messages of support. "We're proud of you. Let us know if you need anything else. You're an inspiration," he realized. That beyond money and food, these words meant the most. They bridged the distance between strangers and made him feel less alone. Before bed, he opened his notebook one last time. He wrote, "Community makes me strong. Help makes me hopeful." He closed it and placed his pen beside it. Lying in the dark, he thought of the storm and the flood. He had walked through water that had threatened to sweep everything away. Hopes, dreams, family. But the flood had also revealed something deeper, the kindness in people's hearts, in the faces of neighbors, in the hands of strangers, in the simple words of a reporter. No one stands alone when courage meets compassion. He drifted to sleep with that thought in his mind, comforted by the memory of voices lifting him up. And though clouds still hung in the sky, he knew that with every sunrise, there would be new proof of hope, rebuilding what the flood had tried to destroy. The morning sun poured through the thin curtains as Marcus stirred awake. He lay still, listening to the soft sound of Mia breathing beside him. Her small hand found his, and he squeezed it gently, smiling at her peaceful face. Dreams of rushing water and lampposts felt distant now, as though they belonged to someone else. Today, he felt a new kind of strength, one born not from struggle alone, but from the kindness and love that had carried him through the storm. He slipped out of bed and found the quiet apartment filled with warm light. The rent notice no longer lay on the kitchen table. Instead, a small calendar hung on the wall with the first clean entry marked "Rent Covered." Below it, Marcus had written in neat letters, 1 month at a time. He poured water into the coffee maker and let it drip into his favorite mug. The smell of coffee filled the air, and he took a moment to breathe it in deeply, feeling hope settle in his chest. Mia bounded into the kitchen in her bright pink pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Papa, breakfast?" she asked with a yawn. He scooped her onto his lap at the small table. From Mrs. Delgado's basket on the counter, he sliced fresh bread and spread butter. They shared a simple meal while the sun climbed higher. Outside, birds chirped, and a light breeze stirred the air through the open window. It was a new day. In more ways than one, after breakfast, Marcus packed a small bag and walked with Mia to his sister's house a few blocks away. He wanted their place on higher ground to feel more like home today. His sister Angela opened the door with a warm hug. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "I made pancakes." Mia squealed with delight, and Marcus laughed. He watched his daughter skip across the kitchen, her laughter bright and free. It was the sound he had missed most during the storm. While Mia played, Marcus sat with Angela at the table, pulled out his notebook, and showed her his plans. He had applied for a new job that paid a little more, one at the community center where flood relief was organized. He also spoke to Carla at the cafe. She promised flexible hours for a few weeks so he could help at the center. "We'll make sure you have time with Mia," Carla had said. "You deserve that." Seeing the encouraging words from neighbors and co-workers in his notebook gave him confidence. He realized his community was woven of many threads, each one strong enough to support him. Later, they walked over to the community center together. The building was buzzing with activity, people sorting donations of clothes and food, volunteers posting flyers for flood safety workshops, neighbors greeting one another with smiles. Marcus felt a swell of pride as he signed in to volunteer. He helped unload boxes from a truck, blankets, canned goods, children's books, and more. Each box seemed light, carried by purpose and hope. When volunteers sorted items for families affected by the flood, Marcus placed books and toys aside for children who needed comfort. He thought of the little girl whose life he had saved and felt grateful to be part of this work. Mia sat at a small table in the corner with other kids, drawing scenes of sunlit fields and smiling faces. She showed her picture to Marcus herself, hugging her father under a rainbow. He hugged her close and whispered, "This is perfect." She beamed and returned to her art, crayons flying across the paper. Watching her, Marcus felt his own heart untangle from worry. Her innocence, her joy, they reminded him why he fought so hard to protect her and others. When the afternoon heat cooled into evening,
Marcus
and Mia walked back to their apartment. The streets were clear, and neighbors waved as they passed. At home, he found a letter slipped under the door. With careful fingers, he opened it. It was from the little girl's family, the ones he rescued in the flood. They wrote of their gratitude, of how their daughter slept peacefully again because she felt safe. They enclosed a photo of her smiling next to a small garden she was planting in her backyard. At the bottom they wrote, "You showed us what love can do. We are forever grateful." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. He folded the letter and placed it in a frame on the shelf. A reminder that compassion created ripples far beyond a single act. That night, after Mia was asleep, Marcus sat at his desk and opened his laptop for the first time in days. He typed flood safety tips into a search bar and found resources he could share at the community center. He drafted simple bullet points: check weather updates, prepare emergency kits, know evacuation routes, help neighbors in need. He felt determined to turn his experience into something that could help others avoid fear and loss. With each sentence, his confidence grew. He realized that rising from hardship did not mean returning to the old struggle. It meant forging anew. path forward, one built on the lessons he had learned and the support he had received in the weeks that followed. Marcus's life settled into a steady rhythm. Mornings began with breakfast and laughter with Mia. Midday, he volunteered at the community center, organizing donations and teaching flood safety workshops. Evenings found him back at the cafe, brewing coffee and chatting with customers who had become friends. He often stayed late, tidying up and helping Carla plan a fundraiser for local families still recovering from the flood. Each day, he added notes to his notebook, filling pages with names of neighbors, times of shifts, and small goals. Apply for new job, save $100, plant flowers with Mia. His rent was covered for the next month, and he used his extra income to buy Mia a new raincoat and boots, her own tiny set for splashing in puddles, unafraid. On a Saturday, they walked to a small park with a gentle creek. Marcus held Mia's hand as she tested the water with her boots, giggling. When it splashed up to her knees, he smiled, remembering the flash flood that had threatened lives just days before. Now, the stream was calm, and their day felt like a promise, as autumn leaves began to fall. Marcus looked at his reflected image in a store window, a man with steady eyes and a straight back. He saw in himself someone who had faced fear and answered with action, someone who had lost money, battled floods, and yet had gained something far more precious: community, purpose, and hope. He knew challenges would come again, as storms always did, but he felt ready. He carried with him a network of caring neighbors, a supportive sister, friends at work, and above all, Mia's bright smile. One crisp evening, Marcus and Mia sat on their apartment balcony as the sun set in shades of orange and pink. Mia traced shapes in the fading light. Marcus wrapped an arm around her. "Do you remember when it rained so hard and the water almost took us away?" he asked gently. Mia nodded. "I was so scared," she said quietly. He kissed her head. "Me too," he admitted. "People helped us, and you were brave." She looked up, eyes wide. "Because you saved me," she said. Marcus's heart swelled. "No," he said firmly. "We saved each other." Your smile saved me every time I felt lost. As darkness settled, stars appeared above them. Marcus and Mia sat in comfortable silence, the city lights below sparkling like fireflies. He thought of the journey they had taken together, from fear and uncertainty into safety and hope. He thought of the strangers who became friends, the hands that reached out, and the hearts that opened wide. In that moment, he knew his life would never be the same, and that was the greatest gift of all. He glanced at Mia's sleepy face and whispered, "I love you, baby." She snuggled closer and whispered back, "I love you, Papa." Under the vast sky, Marcus felt a peaceful joy. The flood had tested them, but it had also shown them what truly mattered. Together, they faced the storm and found a rainbow on the other side, a bridge to a future filled with warmth, kindness, and endless possibility.